You're listening to The Real Well Show with Kathy Fedke, the real estate investor's resource.
Today's guest is one of my favorite people in the world. Truly a good soul. If you are one of those people that think investors are more self-serving than not, this interview might change your mind on that. I'm Kathy Fedke, and welcome to The Real Well Show. Whitney Sewell became a federal agent after serving in the military at a very young age. But when he got married and he and his wife decided to adopt at-risk children, they realized they needed more time and more money to fulfill their charitable dreams. Whitney had heard that other people could build wealth through real estate, so he thought he could too. He and his wife bought 2 triplexes, lost a lot of money on those, but learned a lot as well. Today, he personally owns 250 units, and his company, LifeBridge Capital, has over 100 assets under management. And he's also the host of the Real Estate Syndication Show, and he's here with us on The Real Well Show. So Whitney, welcome. It's so glad to have you here.
My pleasure, Kathy.
You have such a fascinating story. I got to hear you on stage, I think last year when we were around humans, I think 1,000 humans.
That's right. That's right. At the best ever conference. Yes.
Yeah, in Denver, that was the last trip I took, and before I locked myself in my house. But you were on the stage, and your story was so fascinating. So let's kind of go back to, you were originally in the military, is that right?
I was. I joined. I was 17 then, and I just thought it was the right thing to do. Joined in March of 2001. Of course, that was 6 months before our nation was attacked.
Oh, wow. Okay, so what were you sent to do?
So, at that time, obviously, I had no idea we were the country was fixing to be attacked. But, a few years into that, of course, I was activated. I was in the Guard, but we were activated and spent a year in Iraq. I was a gunner on an up-armored Humvee and worked at Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq for a year, all of 2005.
Oh, my gosh. And you were how old?
I would have been 22 or 3 at that time.
Oh, so young. I can't imagine. All right. So what did you learn from that experience?
I learned so much, of course. I mean, there's so many things that could not have been learned any other way, good or bad. But it was a great experience. But I'm thankful to have made it home safely. I mean, thank the Lord. And not everyone in my squad, unfortunately, made it home. But obviously, the Lord just protected me, and I am so grateful to be back. One thing I say the military taught me is to have that never give up mentality. Law enforcement helped with that as well. But, I think the military was really the first hand in that, and boot camp and being overseas. And it's not an option to give up, right? I mean, people are depending on you in a big way. And so I think that's one big thing that I like to talk about, just that the military instilled is just that mindset of saying, no, I can do this. How can we get it done? As opposed to thinking you can't do it.
Yeah. If my life depended on it, how could I get this done?
Right.
Which in the military, oftentimes it does. Yeah. Our daughter's first boyfriend, they broke up years ago, but we kept him. We just thought he was adorable. So whether or not they were together, we were like, he's our adopted son. Anyway, he just shipped out, first time, just enlisted on Monday. So I know he's got big changes ahead. Now, you said you went into law enforcement after, is that right?
I did. So I came home and I wasn't raised around entrepreneurs or people, that invested in real estate or even thought that way. And so I was trying to think, okay, what's my job, my career going to be? And law enforcement was an easy transition. Something I thought about a long time, and coming from military, it just made a lot of sense. I love the structure and the discipline, the uniform. And there were, I think, 1,200 applicants for 5 positions with Kentucky State Police. I was blessed to have one of those. And so I became a police officer with Kentucky State Police at that time. Loved working the road as a police officer. However, my wife and I were married within about a year after that, and quickly discovered that it is very difficult on a family, right? And we just passed each other in the hallway the first whole year of marriage, and it was obvious that it just wasn't what was best, right? And just the lack of income, pushed me to seek something else. How can I supplement that income? And that was in 2009, and that's when I got into real estate. That was the thing that pushed me. I was like, what can I do? I didn't have any college. college. And so it's like, what can I do? What else, can I do to supplement my income? We wanted my wife to be able to stay at home. We had children, and making 35,000 a year was going to be very difficult, to make that happen.
Even
and
in
so
Kentucky.
that's right. I think it's a little better than that now, but it was just obvious that I had to do something else. And that's where real estate came into the picture.
Well, it's not always that obvious for people. I know many people who never made that transition from a low paying or even a high paying job to real estate. So how'd you do it?
Yeah, that I at that time, 2009, I quickly purchased a couple triplexes, very motivated. So, we can do this. And bought 2 triplexes, made tons of mistakes, as most do, or a lot, not all. But I mean, whether it's just poor due diligence, trusting the seller and the realtor too much, and those things, just a lot of mistakes, self-managed, but learned a lot. Right. And thankfully didn't stop there. It was I call it our own university. And thankfully we did learn a lot, or else it would have been a major loss if we had quit, right? It would have been, but we didn't quit there. But soon I became a federal agent, and that moved us to Virginia, where we still live now. I did that for about 9 years. And during that process, or I would say from the 2 triplexes, that's all I could see, right? That's all I had blinders on. That's all I could see was, trying to buy another duplex or another fourplex and things like that. I got up to like a 15 unit, and I thought, wow, that's really big, right? I mean, that was just, it's all I could see. And, but finally I learned about the syndication business and couldn't believe that I hadn't known about that so many years earlier. And so dove into that.
Mm-hmm. And we're able to buy larger units.
That's right. So I started traveling. I started meeting people who who had only been in the business a year or two, and they were buying 100-unit complexes. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. If they can do it, I can do it too. And so we sold everything else. And I know on stage you heard me talk about I had a horse training business too. I was a professional horse trainer at that time. And that was like a passion. And I tell people, it was a passion of mine to be able to train horses professionally. And I was doing that and traveling, doing clinics all over the country. But I had to cut all of that off. My wife and I sold all our real estate, sold the whole horse training business, sold our farm. We were beginning our 3rd adoption process as well at that time.
Wow.
And I wanted to be able to be completely committed to this syndication business. And so we sold everything so I could really just burn that bridge and be completely committed, to the new business.
Yeah. When you sell the farm, that's a commitment.
It was, yes.
All right. Well, one of the things that really stood out for me when you were on stage is your, your personal goals of adopting children. And tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes. When and I'll back that up a little bit to say, when I was raised in one stoplight town, there was like 65 people in my graduating class. There's not much happening there, right? You're not exposed to a whole lot. And so my wife and I were never really around people that were adopted. We didn't know anything about adoption, never even considered it, even up to this point. But we heard this guy named David Platt. He's a pastor that does this thing called Secret Church, long story short. But we were listening to him talk about the need for adoption and how he and his family had adopted, and how it can cost $40,000 to $60,000 to bring a child home through adoption, and how there's 150 to 60 million orphans in the world. And so on our way home from that, we had never thought about this before. We had never talked about adoption before. Maybe we had been married about 2 years at this point. And 2 years. And it was as simple as, why would we not adopt? Why would we not? And so within a week, my wife had filled out her application to adopt from Ethiopia, and we turned that in. 2 years to the month, our first son, Samuel, comes home through adoption. Within 9 to 10 months later, our second son, Elijah, comes home through adoption. And then our daughter now is 1.5 years old, who also came to our family through adoption. And so the Lord has just greatly blessed our family through adoption. But the first 2 processes anyway were very difficult financially. It's very difficult to come up with that money. We talk to families often now who ask us about the process. And that's the big thing for them, is when they hear that, it's like, Whitney, that's more than I make in a year. How can I possibly come up with that money, to be able to afford to do that? And so that's where we wanted to be able to help those families. And now we have a foundation personally where, it will help families.
That's amazing. I didn't realize it was that expensive still. Why would it be so expensive?
It depends.
Yeah. Why would it be so expensive when there's such a need?
Yeah, exactly. And it's very frustrating, but there's tons of legal expenses, and you have to make sure that it's legal, right? Of course. And then I think about travel. I mean, just for our last adoption, I guess we made 4 trips to Florida and staying for sometimes 2 weeks at a time for a legal process, things like that. For our first son, we had to make 2 last minute trips to Ethiopia, which were like 10 grand just for flights
Oh my
alone.
goodness. Wow.
And so, but you've been waiting for over a year and a half at that point, and they called us on Monday and said your court appointment's on Thursday in Ethiopia. So, you're going to find a way to get there, right?
That's incredible. All right, so let's go back to this time when you did your first investment. What did you do wrong, or what did you learn from those first kind of failures?
Yeah, the biggest failures were that first deal, and it was I paid too much for one, but trusted the seller and the realtor too much. Obviously we know a lot more about the business now, but at that time that it was crucial. I mean, because we barely break even every month, just barely, and if anything went wrong, it was obviously just going to cost us big. I did hire a guy to come do an inspection, just like they would do a home inspection or whatnot. But I followed this guy in every nook and cranny, flushing every toilet, in every crawl space, all those things. And he gives me this nice booklet. I'll never forget all the pictures and all these things. It looks so nice. You think you've done this great job of due diligence, right?
Yeah.
But it didn't do anything to help me think, and it's my fault. But it didn't help me to think through, well, how long are these AC units going to last? How long is this roof really going to last? What is just getting some better market statistics too, and rent in the area, things like that, that I wish I had done.
So if you were to do that again, or talk to your younger self, or to your children who will probably want to be investing and following your footsteps, how would you look at an inspection report today? I think you just said it, really calculating the life of the existing, infrastructure of the property, but how would you underwrite it now?
I mean, now, as far as, due diligence is done so differently now for us. We have an expert for each of those things, right? I mean, we have professional roofers that are, if we're buying a property with 30 buildings, there's professionals getting on every building to look at those roofs. They're looking at the AC units. They're helping us think through each of those things so we can plan, very precisely, how many units should we have to expect to replace this year and the year after, or within, say, the next 5 years? Are we prepared for that? How many units total need to be remodeled, or whatever? Whether it's appliances, whether it's the sink, or whether, all these things, the flooring, all that stuff is checked. We go into every unit and have a massive checklist and say, okay, these things are good, or these things are not so good. And then it's compiled. So, when we're still going through that negotiation process, or through due diligence, we know about those things before we close on the property.
Okay. What else should people know about transitioning from owning property or self-managing? I mean, I know we made huge mistakes when self-managing. What did you learn from that process?
You can't lead a business with your heart. It's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, me too.
I remember, one tenant specifically, and I tell this story often, but it's like every month she was late. Every month, but she would always pay a late fee. I couldn't figure it out. She would always pay a late fee. So eventually it's like, well, this isn't too bad if she's always paying, right? Even if it's a week late, she's always paying the late fee. However, I even sat down with her. Her father came, he signed, and, with her and all these things, they seem so reputable. But I even sat down with her a few months in and tried to build a budget with her, tried to talk through what this should look like, and planned it out. I remember saying, okay, with this budget, even giving her some spending money, you got like 2 months that you're still going to be late, but then you can be on track, and then you can be saving, and you can be never happened, eventually moves out. It's just, it's so hard. Right. And that's why too, I'm thankful for the syndication business. I love the, being able to have a professional brand, work with professionals like professional property management who are doing they're professionals doing the day-to-day things like that. While, I'm working with investors and working professionals on this end, as well, as opposed to looking for more tenants and toilets, with that kind of business.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So with syndicating, one thing you said earlier, and for those not familiar with the term, syndication means a group project where a bunch of investors come together, pool their money, and somebody manages that investment. So you get something much bigger than you would on your own. You mentioned that you met some people who were syndicating with only 2 years experience. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, how do you protect, you don't want to be the guinea pig of somebody's learning curve, right? You don't want to be that. So how do you avoid, kind of working with someone who's just learning on the job?
That is a great point. And I mean, everybody had to get started somewhere, right? And unfortunately, there are people that they took a risk on me, right? On the first deal, because it's difficult, no doubt. The first deal is so hard. But as a passive investor, you have to ask, and I would encourage anyone that's investing passively in syndication, ask, are you the operator? Are you the one, operating this property? Are you the one in charge of these things? Because oftentimes people are getting started and partnering with other people, and not that that's a bad thing, but you want to know. You want to know that, right? And it could even be a good thing as far as they're partnering with an operator that may have 10 years experience, or done this many, many times. But you want to know, obviously, a track record. At least that you're upfront with it. Maybe this person personally, and you're very comfortable with their lack of experience. But you need to know that so you can assess that yourself, right? But as far as the person getting started, partner with people, add value to another group that's already established, right? So you can gain that experience, under somebody's tutelage, really, that's been there and done that.
Yeah, the operations people need to have done it before successfully. Right. Many times. Yes. There's, there's marketing geniuses out there. You're surrounded by them. You're one of them. There's people who, again, are very good at the marketing piece. What they may not have, or they may be lacking, is the experience in managing an asset, especially a large one. So I couldn't agree more. Just make sure that the person operating, not necessarily selling this deal to you, but operating it, has tremendous experience. So where do you see the opportunity in 2021 and beyond?
Great question. I ask it on every show as well. I think it's interesting how things are changing very quickly right now. And I think, we always talk about, obviously, what markets you're in and what's important. And we've all, anybody investing in real estate, you learn about the market, right? But I think there's some different details about markets right now you need to know about. We've always known you should know about, like, the local government and things like that. But I feel like some of that is even more important now than ever. As we see some states that are really changing the tune for real estate investors, and so it's some stuff you have to know up front, right? Or I hope right? Or at least that you've done some investigation about the local market, local authorities, things like that. If you can't evict people for 2 years, that's a problem, right? What was in New York that there's actually local authorities that are going around and telling tenants this, things like that. So, do you know those things, and you can't always know that, maybe you've owned a property there for 20 years and it's done amazing. But, those are things I think that we're going to have to watch, over the next little bit to see what happens. Right. And, if that takes hold in other states or other markets that you're active in.
Great advice. So would you say you'll be a net buyer or a net seller in the coming years?
I would say both. I would say that we are buyers. We're buyers. We purchased 4 large deals last year, and I don't see that, hopefully not slowing down this year, but we'll see. 2 of those deals we got 10% discounts on because we walked away, first. And so we want to be patient. We don't have to do the deals, and so we want to be very patient. And if they make sense.
Yeah, we've been turning away more deals than we've been accepting because, there is a lot of money chasing multifamily, driving. Actually, cap rates have not improved. They keep going down, which means the property is getting more expensive, which is good if you own it, not as good if you're trying to buy it, right? If you're trying to sell it, you could do really well. So if you're trying to acquire, it's just more important than ever to be very good at your due diligence, or know how you can increase income somehow on that property, something that maybe the former owner just couldn't see. So, yeah, wonderful. Well, your story is fascinating, your commitment to doing good in this world. I wanted to have you on the show because there has been a lot of pushback on landlords, that we're oftentimes investors are oftentimes seen as the bad guy. And I just wanted the world to see what you're doing to make a difference.
Thank you. No, and I think it's on the property level too, as far as how you care for tenants, and even on our personal side, trying to do something like a foundation. I think it's, I wish we could all just, I don't know, care obviously as much about the tenants too, and they're, it just makes a difference. I think when you're working with somebody that, that it's not only about increasing their size of their wallet,
Do you have a foundation?
We do. It's called the LifeBridge Foundation.
Oh,
Yes.
that's right.
So
Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's its sole purpose. My wife and I have committed half of our personal profits to that, so we can help families. And then, but it will be, there's another organization I'll put out called the bothhands.org. And ultimately they help families raise money. And you find a widow that needs help on her home and can't afford it. And so Both Hands helps you to organize free construction for this widow's home. And then the people that are working on it get sponsored. But then all the donations go towards the adoption. So you're helping an orphan and a widow. It's a really cool thing. But our foundation is going to start providing matching grants for those families, that are going to do a project like that for their adoption.
You've committed half of your profit to this foundation. That's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, I've heard other investors doing that. I usually say 10%, half is better. Yeah, you're doing great. Great work. Well, thank you so much for inspiring our audience and helping people see kind of the bigger why. You're just a really good soul, and I truly wish you the best.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for joining me here on The Real Wealth Show. I hope you're inspired to create both more time and money to live life the way you want to. You can find out more about how to do that at realwealthshow.com.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an offer to buy or sell any securities or to make or consider any investment or course of action. For more information, go to realwealthshow.com.